Hello, in this lecture I will continue to talk about the rules of chess. So first of all I will start to talk about the progress of the game. The player with the white tools is first to play. Each player in turn moves one of the tools in his possession. Only one tool, except in the case of the castling, as I have already showed you in the first lecture. The castling is in castling actually you move two pieces in one move. This is the small castling, and this is the long castling. Okay, this is the only option in the game of chess to move two tools in one move. Okay, so the game continues until a decision is made. The player can move any piece in turn and move it wherever he wants, provided that it does not violate the rules for moving the pieces. Also, if a certain player's king is exposed to a threat from an opponent's piece, a situation known as check, the player must do everything in his power to eliminate this situation. Okay, for example, in this position the black bishop threatens check on the white king, so the white must do everything to stop the threat of chess. For example, he can move to this square, if he fails to eliminate the threat, he will lose the game. In state known as checkmate. So this is a position of one minute, please. This is a position of checkmate. Why? Because the white king is threatened in check by the black bishop, and the white cannot eliminate the threat of chess because it cannot move to g3, because in g3 is threatened by the pawn h4, and he also cannot move to the square g4 because in g4 is the king is threatened by the pawn f5, and he also cannot move to square e3 because in e3 he is threatened by the pawn d4, and he also cannot move to square e4 because in e4 he is threatened by the pawn f5, and it is also threatened by the black bishop that is on c6 square. So this is a situation of mate. Actually, the black made a mate or a checkmate on the white king. Okay. This is a position of check because the black bishop threatens to eat the king, the white king, and any move that doesn't result in eliminating the threat of check immediately will be illegal. In this position, that the black threatens a check by the bishop, if white moves his pawn, it is an illegal move because he is on the state of check. When you are on the state of check, you must immediately eliminate the threat of check from your king. So this is an illegal move, and the white, for example, can eliminate the threat check by doing this move, for example, by blocking the line of the attack. So any move that would immediately result in the player's king being in check is also illegal. For example, in this situation, if it is white's turn, the white must not do this move. This move is an illegal move. Why? Because the black pawn on g5 threatens to eat the white king, so it is not allowed to any side to move his king to a square that it will be threatened, that his king will be threatened by the opponent's tool. Okay, for example, also in this situation, it is not allowed to move the king from f3 to e3. Why? Because the bishop threatens the king. So this is an illegal move. So, and also this is an illegal move. Okay? The king is the only piece that must not be deliberately placed under threat by another piece. So that is exactly what I explained. This is an illegal move, and also this is an illegal move. Now I will explain the rules of beating your opponent's tool or eating your opponent's tool. If one of the opponent's pieces stands in the way of the moving piece, he can eat it, provided it is a legal move. Okay? So, in this situation, as I have already explained you, the bishop moves diagonally, so he can move on the main diagonal, and so in his way, if in his way of moving there is a white tool, in this situation he can eat the white pawn by doing this step. Okay? So, because of the fact that the bishop moves diagonally, if in the way of its move there is your opponent's tool, then you can eat that tool. Okay? Unlike in checkers, for example, eating is a right and not an obligation. By eating another tool, it means removing it from the board and placing the eating tool in its place. Okay, so the black bishop can eat the white pawn, and the eating process is actually taking the pawn from the board and placing the bishop in the place that the pawn was. Okay? Also, in this situation, the black knight can eat the white pawn like this, or he also has the possibility to eat the other pawn like this. Okay. Also, the king cannot be beaten. Okay, the king cannot be beaten if you, for example, threaten the king. In this situation, the black bishop threatens the king, so the white must eliminate the threat of the threat of check by moving his king to other square, or he can also block the line of the threat by moving the pawn from e2 to e4. It is customary to declare in a situation where he is exposed, the king is exposed to a threat and cannot be defended, for checkmate. So, in a situation so in this situation, for example, the black is threatened in check by the white king is threatened in check by the black bishop. Yes, and no, it changes the situation. So this situation is a situation of checkmate. Actually, in this situation, the black made checkmate to the white. Why? Because the white king is threatened in check by the black pawn on e4, and the white cannot escape from the threat because he cannot go to g4, because in g4 he is threatened by the black pawn. Also, he cannot go to f4 because in f4 he is threatened by by pawn g5, and he also cannot eat the pawn on e4 because the pawn on e4 is protected by the pawn in f5, and he also protected by the bishop on c6. So this situation is a checkmate. So the black made a checkmate to the white, and he won the game because the white king is in a check position and he cannot defend the king, because as I have already showed you, he cannot move the king to other square because he will be threatened in other squares. In these squares he will be threatened by other tools, and also he cannot eat the threatening pawn. So the white actually lose the game. It is a checkmate position. You can call it checkmate position or mate position. Okay? All tools eat according to their movement. For example, the bishop will only eat on its diagonal. As I have already shown you, the bishop can eat on its diagonal, so the bishop can eat the white pawn like this, and also in this situation, if it is black's turn, the black can eat the white rook by moving his black rook. So, because the rook moves straight, if on his course of moving there is an opponent's tool, he can eat that tool. Okay? And if it is white's turn, the white also can eat the black rook like this. Okay? So usually you eat a tool of your opponent in the way you move your tool. If your tool is bishop, and you know that I explained you that the bishop move diagonally, so the bishop also eats diagonally. Okay? The rook moves straight, so, and also the rook eats straight. Okay? And the knight moves like the letter L, rotated in all directions, so the black can eat the white pawn. Why? Because it is a place that it can move in, and if in the place that the knight can move there is an opponent's tool, he can eat that tool. Okay, so this is usually how you eat your opponent's tool, but there is one exception, except for the pawn which moves forward but eats diagonally. So as I have already explained to you in the first lecture, the pawn moves only forward. yes, but the pawn hits diagonally. So if the white pawn moves 2 steps forward, then the black pawn can hit the white pawn diagonally, 1 step forward diagonally. So, as you can see, the way that the pawn moves is not the same way as he hits. It moves forward and it hits diagonally, 1 step diagonally in the forward direction. If it is white's turn, for example, it can hit the black pawn diagonally, like this. As I've already explained to you in the first lecture. Okay? A special case of beating is beating for its movement, or en passant rule. As I have already explained to you, the en passant rule, in the case that the white moves 2 steps forward, then the black pawn has the right to hit the white pawn like this. This is the en passant rule. I will explain the rule broadly later, the en passant rule. Okay? So now I will talk about the stages of the game. The first stage of the game is the opening. At this stage, the player develops his tools, which are blocked behind the row of pawns. Yes, the tools are blocked behind the row of pawns. The black pawns are here, and the black tools blocked behind the row of the black pawns. In order to allow them to control the center of the board and threaten the opponent's defense. So every side develops its tools in order to allow them to control the center of the board and threaten the opponent's defense. Okay, so the first rule in chess is to try to control the center of the board. This is the center of the board, and your aim is to control the center of the board. The first the opening phase also includes the evacuation of one of the sides in order to allow castling, which aims to fortify the king in a corner and keep him away from the exposed center. So you will evacuate the knight and the bishop in order to do the castling, and also you will evacuate here the knight on b1, the bishop on c, the knight on b1, the bishop on c1, and the king on d1. You will evacuate them from the first row in order to do the big castling. A typical opening usually involves a double jump with the king's or queen's pawn. So you can do 2 steps with the king's pawn or the queen's pawn. You can also develop the pawn to d4, and then the black also can do the same parallel move, taking out 1 or 2 knights. Yes, you can also take out your knight. The black side can do similar thing, and taking out 1 or 2 bishops. Yes, the white can take out the bishop. You should notice that I take the bishop to the center of the board in order to control the center of the board, but because you can see that the white bishop on c5 threatens the square d5, and he also threatens to eat the pawn f7. So it is a good move. The black can do the parallel move, and then castling. The white can do the small castling. Okay, then the black can move his knight, the white can move his pawn, and the black also can do the small castling. Okay, there are openings called gambits, in which one of the sides sacrifice material, usually pawn, in order to take control of the center. So I will show you what it means, gambit opening. Or I will show you what is the queen gambits. When the white starts with pawn d2 to d4, and then the black do pawn d7 to d5, and then the white actually sacrifice his pawn on c2, he moves from c2 to c4. yes, actually he sacrificed his pawn on c4 because the black can eat that pawn. So this opening is called the gambit of the queen accepted. Why? Because the black accept the sacrifice of the white pawn. So actually the white sacrificed his pawn and the black actually accepted the sacrifice in the sense of that he eat the white's pawn. Yes, the white did c2 to c4 and the black accepts the sacrifice in the sense that he eat the white pawn. So this opening is called Queen's Gambit accepted. So why the white actually sacrificed his pawn? He sacrificed his pawn in order to gain control of the center, in the center of the board. Then he can do this step, and by doing this step he actually controls the squares e5 and d5 and also f5 and c5. Yes, so you actually sacrifice a pawn in order to gain control in the center of the board. These two pawns control the center of the board. Okay? The number of openings is large and the number of their variants is even larger. Professional players memorize many openings in order not to make mistakes at the beginning of the game, which will give an early advantage to the opponent. So we finished to talk about the first phase of the game, that is the opening stage. The second phase is the middle game. Took place after most of the tools had already been developed and the battle is at its most intense in the center of the board. Usually while exchanging tools and trying to break the other side's pawn alignment. At this stage, it is possible to implement a large number of tactics to accumulate a material and positional advantage. So there is a lot of tactics in the middle game. The middle game that occurs actually after the opening game. We have a lot of tactics that I will not discuss on them. I'll discuss on some of the tactics maybe in the next lesson. Okay? So we finished to talk about the second phase, that is the middle game, and the third stage is the end game, and this stage happens when a large number of tools exchanges have been made without a decisive advantage being gained for any side. This stage usually includes a small number of pieces for each side. So the end, the third stage is actually the end game, and in the end game you have a small number of pieces, a small number of tools on the board. It might be a king, a knight, or a bishop, or rook. So it might be, for example, a rook and a king So this is an example of end game. Okay? And another example of end game might be this example. So each side the players try to overwhelm each other's, usually by crowning one of the pawns to a heavy piece, such a queen. So actually in this position the black will try to move his pawn to the first row in order to do crowning, in order to replace that pawn, this pawn, to a queen. Okay, so this is one example of endgame. At that point, the threat in checkmate to the king is small. Actually, in this position, there is no way to checkmate the black queen because you have only white bishop on the board. Therefore, the king becomes an active tool, protecting the pawns and supporting their progress towards the 8th row. So in this position, the black king will support his pawn on f4, and he will the black actually will try to advance his pawn to the first row, as I already told you, in order to replace the pawn to a queen. Because the end game requires precise play, many players carefully study common end game positions. So a professional player will memorize hundreds of situations, of positions, of end games, of different end games. Okay, so we finished to talk about the 3 stages of the game. Now I will talk about special moves and situations in the game. The first special rule, as I have already mentioned, is the en passant rule, or beating through its movement. So, as I have already told you, whenever one of the sides, in this side, if it's white terrace, whenever he does two steps move in his pawn, then the black has the right to hit that pawn like this. This is the en passant rule. Pawn can hit another pawn through its course or by the way. And only when the opponent's pawn moves 2 squares forward. Okay? Only when the white pawn moves 2 squares forward, the black has the right to hit it like this. This is the en passant rule. Or if the black moves 2 steps forward, then the white has the right to hit that pawn like this. So only when the pawn moves from the second square 2 steps forward, and for the black, when it moves 2 steps forward from the 7th row. Okay? So only when he moves 2 squares forward with his pawn and passes the squares threatened by the pawn. The hit is made as if the opponent's pawn has advanced by only 1 square. So when the black moves 2 squares, you considered it as if he advanced only 1 square, and you hit it like that. And the en passant rule is only valid immediately after the opponent's move and cannot be used afterwards. Okay? So, for example, if it is black's turn and the black moves 2 steps forward, now it is white's turn, it can hit the pawn like this according to en passant rule. So he can do it immediately, but if he does another move, then he loses the right to hit the pawn according to en passant rule. So the right to eat the pawn according to en passant rule is only immediately after the black made 2 square steps in his pawn, with his pawn. If the white does another move, he loses his right to eat the pawn according to en passant rule. So if he goes with his king, then he can no longer eat this pawn according to en passant rule. Okay, so the en passant rule is valid only immediately after the movement of the pawn 2 squares forward. Okay? So we finished to talk about the en passant rule. Now I will talk about the special rule of castling. The small castling is on the king side. This is the small castling, and the long castling and the big castling is on the queen side. This is the queen side, and this is called the big castling. In the game of chess, the castling is a joint move of the king and the rook that is considered as one move and is carried out in 2 stages. The first stage is the king moves 2 squares towards the rook. And the second stage is that the rook is moved 1 square after its king. So this is the small castling, and it is considered as one move even though that 2 tools moved in the process of castling. It is considered as one move only. The same rule applies for the big castling. It is considered as one move. Castling will be done under the following conditions. The first condition for castling is that the king and the rook didn't move at all from their starting squares. So in this position, this is the starting positions of the king and the rooks. That is to say, the starting position of the game. In that position, the rooks and the king is positioned at the start of the game, and if the rook moves and then comes back to its square, h1, then you are not allowed to do small castling. Why? Because the rook is already moved. The same rule is for the big castling. If the rook on a1 moves during the game and then comes back to a1, in this position you are not allowed to do big castling. Why? Because the rook on a1 has already moved. So you are not allowed to do big castling. But if only the rook on a1 moved and the king and the rook on h1 didn't move at all, haven't moved at all, then you are allowed to do the small castling. So whenever one of the rooks moves, then you are not allowed to do castling with that rook. If the rook on a1 moved already, you are not allowed to do big castling. And if the rook on h1 has already moved, you are not allowed to do small castling. And the second condition for castling is that the king is not in a chess threat at that moment. So in this position, the king is threatened by check by the black bishop. So in this position, you are not allowed to do castling. Not small castling, and also you are not allowed to do long castling. Okay, so if your king is under the threat of check, you are not allowed to do castling at all. Okay? The third condition for castling is that the king will not be found in the threat of chess at the end of the castling. So, for example, in this position, if it is white's turn, the white is not allowed to do small castling. Why? Because if he does small castling, then his king will be under the threat of check and after the castling. So this is an illegal move. If you king is under check after the castling, you are not allowed to do the castling. But in this situation, you do allow to do the big castling. There is no problem with big castling in this situation, in this position. Only the small castling is not allowed in this position. So the fourth condition for castling is the king doesn't move past a square threatened by the opponent's piece. So in this position, the small castling is not allowed. Why? Because the square f1 is threatened by the black bishop, and if the king will do the small castling, he will pass under a square, he will pass along a square that is threatened by the opponent's tool. So it is not allowed to do the small castling. But you can do the big castling. And in this position, you are not allowed to do the big castling. Why? Because the king must pass along the square that is through the square d1 that is threatened by the black bishop. So you are not allowed to do big castling, but you can do the small castling. Okay. And the fifth condition for castling is that there are no tools that separate the king from the rook. So in this position, the white knight separates between the king and the rook on edge 1, so small castling is not allowed. You can do the big castling. And in this position, you are not allowed to do the big castling. Why? Because the white bishop is between the king and the rook on a1. So in this position, you are not allowed to do castling at all. Okay. A distinction is made between small castling, which is the castling beside the king. Yes, this castling is the castling beside the king. And big castling, which is castling beside the queen. Because the queen is in the square d1 on the opening of the game, on the start of the game, this castling is called castling beside the queen. Okay, this is the big castling. Okay. If only one of the rooks has been moved, it is still possible for the other rook to be used for castling. Okay, if for example this rook has been moved here and then comes back here, you cannot do the small castling. Yes, but you can do the big castling. If the square adjacent to the rook is threatened, it is not possible to make a small castling. In this position, the square G1 is threatened by the black bishop, and that is the reason that you are not allowed to do small castling according to rule number 3 that says that the king will not be found in the threat of chess at the end of the castling. So if he do the castling, the king will be found at the threat of chess after the castling. So it is not allowed. It is an illegal move. But you can make a big castling because the king doesn't pass through a square that is threatened by the opponent's tool. Okay. Even if the rook itself is threatened and the conditions mentioned above are met, it is allowed to castle. So, in this position, you can see that the white rook on h1 is threatened by the bishop on e4. The black bishop threatens to eat the white rook, although the bishop is on a threat from although the rook is on threat by the black bishop, you can do the small castling. Because all the 5 conditions that I have mentioned are met. Okay. According to the rules of the game, to make castling, the king must be moved first, and then the rook must be moved. Taking the rook before moving the king means a move where only the rook moves. So if you want to castle a small castle, a small castling, first of all you must move the king 2 steps, and then you will move the rook. The same rule is for the big castling. First of all you must move the king, and then and then you move the rook. But if you touch the rook on h1, you cannot do small castling. You must move with the rook, but you cannot do castling. In order to do castling, first of all, you must touch the king. It is no matter if you want to do big castling or small castling. In order to do castling, first of all, you must touch the king and move it 2 steps. And then you touch the rook. But if in the first you touch the rook, you cannot do castling at all. You must move to the rook to any square that is allowed. For example, if you touch this rook, you can only move the rook on these squares, and you are not allowed to do big castling. Okay? The castling is an important move in early stages of the game because it serves 2 important purposes. First, it moves the king to a more protected place than the center of the board where the battle started. So in the small castling, the king will be moved to g1, that is more protected square than the center of the board, or if it does the big castling, the king will be moved to c1, that is more protected square. And also it takes the rook out of the corner and into a better attacking position in the center of the board. In the big castling, actually you move the rook to the center column of the board, that is the column D. Column D is the center column of the board, And also in this small castling, you moved the rook to a column F that is very close to the center of the board. So the white rook controls column F, that is close to the center of the board. Okay? The castling is the last move added to the chess rules, and it appears in the book of the French author Claude Roget in 1560. Okay? So we finished to talk about castling. Now I will talk about the decision. Check refers to the situation when one of the players attack his opponent's king that is, the king stands in a situation where in the next move he will be taken if no action is taken. So this is a check position. The white threatens check. The black side threatens check on the white king because the bishop, the black bishop, threatens check on the king. So this is a check position. In a check position, the attack king's side must cause the check position to stop in any possible way. Okay? So the white must stop the threat of check by the black bishop in any possible way, whether by eating the attacking piece. In this situation, he cannot eat the bishop because the bishop is far from the king. But in this situation, the black pawn threatens check on the white king, so the white actually can eat the black pawn. Okay, this is a legal move. He can eat the pawn, he can eat the pawn, the tool or the pawn that threatens him check. And also in this position, the white king can eliminate the threat of check by the black bishop simply by eating the bishop. Okay, this is one option. So the one that is threatened by check can eat the attacking piece. This is one option, or it can block the path of the attack in this position. The black bishop on c6 threatens check on the white king. The white can actually block the line of the attack. This is the line of the attack because the bishop moves diagonally, so it threatens the white king by check. Actually, the white can block the attack by moving the pawn from f2 to f3. This is the second way to eliminate the check. You can block the line of the attack by moving the pawn to f3. You actually block the line of the attack, or the path of the attack. You block the path of the attack. Okay? Or the third option that you have, you can move the king. You can move the king to another square that it is not threatened. Okay? So you actually, when your king is threatened by check, you have actually three options. You can eat the piece that threatens the king, or you can block the path of the attack, or you can block the line of the attack, or you can move the king to a square that it is not threatened. Okay, those are the only three options that you have when your king is threatened by check. But it must not be moved to the square that is being attacked. Okay, so in this situation that the black bishop threatens the white king, it is not allowed to move the king to edge 3. White is not allowed because in this square the black bishop that is on c8 threatens the king. So it is not allowed to move the king to edge 3 because this is an illegal move, because the black bishop on c8 threatens to eat the king. So a legal move can be to move the king to g1, or to move the king on to g3, or we can move also the king to h2, and the last option that the white has is to block the path of the attack by doing pawn f2 to f3. Okay? If none of these actions are possible, the situation is called checkmate. A situation in which the king cannot defend himself at all. So checkmate occurs when there is a threat to the king, the king cannot escape to any place that is not under threat, and there is no tool that can protect the king. So a checkmate situation Actually, this position is a checkmate. The black did a checkmate to the white. Why? Because he cannot move his king to a square that it is not be threatened. He cannot move the king to h1 because of this bishop. He cannot move the king to g2 because of this bishop. Oh. No. I made a mistake. So this is a position of checkmate by the black because he cannot move the king to h1 because of the bishop, he cannot move it to g1 because of the bishop, and he cannot move the king to f2 because of the bishop on d4, and he also cannot move the king to f1 because of the queen that is on c4. So this is a checkmate position. Actually, the black won the game. So but you can see that the king must be under the threat of check in order to do the checkmate. If the king is not under the threat of check and he has nowhere to go, then it is not a checkmate. Whenever the king is not under the threat of check, but he has no place to go and he cannot move any other piece, any other tool, then it is a situation of draw. So in order to win the game, the king must be in the threat of check. And if it is in the threat of check and he has no place to go, no square to go, that it is not be under the threat of other tool, and also he cannot block the threat of check or the line of check, then it is a mat position, like this position. The king is under threat of check by the black pawn, and it has no square to go, because in all the squares that he would go, he will be under the threat of check by other tools, and he cannot block the line of the attack, the path of the attack. So this is a situation of checkmate or mate, and the black won the game. Whoever managed to checkmate won the game. Also, there are several rules that regulates the matter of check. The player must not make a move so that his king is threatened by check. So I will explain you what I mean by this. This is an illegal move because the king cannot go to square f1 because in f1 is threatened by the queen, by the black queen. So this move is an illegal move. And also the the white knight actually cannot move at all, because if he moves then the king will be under the threat of check, so this is also an illegal move. And when your king is under the threat of check or a check position, you must cause the check position to stop if possible. Any other move in a check position is illegal. So this is a check position because the black bishop threatens check on the white king, and if the white do this move, this is an illegal move. Why? Because the white king is under threat position, under check position, and he must eliminate the check. So that move is an illegal move. If the opposing player is not paying attention to the check and makes illegal move, for example, if the white in this position moved his pawn from h2 to h4, his king must not be hit and his attention must be drawn to the fact that he is threatened by the check. So the illegal move is cancelled. Yes, you must return the pawn to its previous position, and you must make another move in its place to eliminate the threat of check by the black bishop by doing, for example, this move king g1 to f1. Okay, so if the white did an illegal move, the white is not losing the game, you cannot hit the king, but the opponent must tell the white that he did an illegal move because his king is under check and the white must eliminate the threat of check by moving his king to another square. So you must cancel the illegal move. Okay? Okay? Moving a piece so that it threatens the opponent's king by itself is called direct check. So I will explain you what is direct check. If it is black's terrain, the black can do direct check on the white's king. The black actually can move his bishop from c8 to a6, and in this position actually the black moved his bishop, and that bishop that moved threatens check on the white king. So if the tool that you move threatens a check on your opponent's king, then it is called a direct check. Okay? Moving a piece so that it opens a line of attack for the piece standing behind it to face the opposing king is called indirect check. So I will explain what is indirect check. In this position, if it is black's terrain, then it can move his pawn from b5 to b4 and threaten actually a check by the black bishop on a6. So actually the black moved one tool and exposed the white king to a check by another tool. The white moved the pawn and exposed the white king, the black moved his pawn from b5 to b4 and exposed the white king to a check by another tool, by the black bishop. Okay? So actually that is indirect check. So if you move a piece that opens a line of attack for other piece standing behind it, it's called indirect check. So this is the indirect check. And the third kind of check is the double check. Moving a piece so that it itself threatens the opponent's king and at the same time opens a line of attack against the opponent's king for the piece standing behind it, that is a combination of direct check and indirect check in one move. It's called double check. So I will show you an example of double check. If it is black's turn, the black actually can do double check on the white's king. How? By moving his bishop from e7 to h4. So this move actually threatens a direct check by the bishop and indirect check by the rook on e8. Okay, so you actually created a direct check by the bishop and indirect check by the rook. So this situation is called double check. So the combination of indirect check with direct check is called double check. Okay? And the last type of check that I will explain is the cross check. So there is also a type of check known as cross check, when a player responds to a king threat with a counter check while blocking his opponent's check. So I will show you the example of direct cross check. In this position, the black rook threatens check on the white king, and the white can escape from the check by moving his king to e1 and create a check to the black king by the bishop on d1. So actually here two things happen by this move. The king escaped from the check by the black rook from one side, and from the other side he also created a check on the black king by the bishop on d1. So this is the position of indirect check. Okay, this is the indirect check. Okay, thank you very much.